Well, good morning and welcome back. We're off to a great start this morning for DEF 2021. We've already had our first keynote and two breakouts. One wrestling with human intelligence, providing a hands-on training. I saw some outtakes about pushing marshmallows there and getting stronger. And then one panel wrestling with AI as a tradecraft and taking a lot of the audience questions. So two great breakouts. We're excited to bring everyone back together here on the live stream for our next event, which is the Share the Mic in Cyber panel. So let me give a brief overview of Share the Mic in Cyber, and then I'll hand it off to our distinguished panelists. Share the Mic in Cyber, if you haven't come across it already, is a movement started by Camille Stewart and Lauren Zabrick with the aim of addressing issues stemming from systemic racism in cybersecurity. The social media campaign highlights the experiences of Black practitioners in the field, catalyzing a critical conversation on race in the industry and shining a light on Black practitioners' accomplishments to showcase them as experts in their field, all while creating professional opportunities and bringing the cyber community together. If you want to look through that again, sharethemicincyber.com has a lot of great information. And like I said, it started as an online conversation on Twitter and LinkedIn, but it's become a lot more. This is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, this month in October. And today itself is their fourth round of the social media campaign. And for that, they're excited to have over 140 individuals participating today and over 20 organizations that are supporting the activities by amplifying the messages on social media, by donating to a scholarship fund, by taking action to recruit and retain diverse talent in cyber. And DEF is excited to be just one of those partnering organizations through our panel today. And we're thrilled to have one of the Share the Mic in Cyber's founders, Lauren, here to moderate our panel. Lauren is also the executive director of the Cyber Project at the Harvard Belfer Center. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Lauren. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to DEF for hosting this and bringing together all these experts to have this really great conversation. This particular conversation is really about innovation and culture. Something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially, so I came out of government, right? I was in the intelligence community, and we think a lot about this particular subject. I was in an office that I think was very innovative. We were sort of entrepreneurial, if you will. Biggest thing about that is that we were allowed to do that. We were encouraged, we were empowered. And so that has really informed my thinking on these issues. When people are given the tools that they need, when they're empowered to do the work, and given that flexibility, then I think that's when people are really able to do some amazing work. But it goes beyond that too. So creating the conditions for a diverse and an inclusive workforce, and one in which all people are welcomed, encouraged to bring their full selves and encouraged to bring their expertise to the problem sets, I think is when we are very much at an advantage, right? That's when we can bring to bear all our resources against the problem set, which, as we know, just keeps growing and growing and growing. The threat surface and the amount of threats and the diversity of threats are honestly overwhelming these days. And so we need as many people and as many perspectives and creative thoughts as possible to help to secure our nation, from everything. So thank you again to DEF, and I just want to welcome the panelists here today to talk about these issues. First, I'm going to go back to my gallery screen here. We have Jules Okafor, Matthew Braun, Mary Galloway, O'Shea Bowens, and Caroline Wong. And I just want to thank you all for being here today. And I'd love to be able to maybe go around the horn a little bit, just to have you introduce yourselves, where you're from, what you're working on, and maybe give a quick thought on this particular area, and then we can dive into some questions if that sounds good. So I'm going to go around my screen. Matthew Braun, you're up first.
Morning, everyone, and thank you, Lauren. My name is Matthew Braun. I am a regional vice president for NCC Group. We're a Manchester headquartered global cybersecurity consultancy firm that specializes in everything, a thing called specialization. My background, I came up through the pen test trenches, background in computer science, and in a former life, I was a Beltway bandit doing defense contracting in the DC area. That was a while ago, but I have both fond and somewhat challenging memories about it. In terms of, I think just to kind of kick off my one observation, it really comes down to sponsor a culture of innovation. You have to have clear objectives-based planning, not process orientation. Because if you judge people on their adherence to process only, you stifle innovation. If you give them objectives and then just mark how they are tracking on those objectives, give your smart people free rein, within reason. I think you'll have and reward even efforts that don't necessarily measure up, but get partway there. You will encourage innovation versus stifling it. I guess we can go to the next panelist and we can come back to these issues.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I completely agree with you. And those are great points. Jules, you are up next on my little clockwise screen.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Juliet Okafor. I am an attorney, but also the CEO and founder of Revolution Cyber, a security culture as a service firm. What we do is actually work with CISO security leaders to build security culture in their organizations by forming stronger relationships and partnerships with stakeholders, helping them to gain buy-in from executive leadership, and leveraging and enabling users, employees to actively help to protect the organization. Much of what I focus on, and just given my background and having 2 degrees and also a long history of sales experience, is that this idea of influence is critical in cybersecurity because security is the one thing people don't want to do, but have to do. And literally everyone's competing in an organization for time and attention. What we've done in the past is really force people to do the thing. What we need to do is influence them to do it, to take it on as their own, and then share accountability for it across the organization. The only way that I believe that can be done is by putting user needs first, speaking like human beings, like normal, how you would talk to someone next door, and breaking down really complex security concepts so people understand the behaviors that need to happen in order for the culture change to occur. What we're trying to do in security these days is drive change through people. And in doing so, the culture is impacted by that. And I've found over and over again that in starting with process and with feelings, thoughts, fears, enabling strengths, people and behaviors change, they are able to get a few people excited who then drive that change across the organization. Thanks.
Jules, that's incredible. I've never heard of culture as a service before, but I am so excited about this. And I completely agree with you. It's all about the people. And I feel like we forget about that, right? We forget it's the people doing the work. We need to take care of our people. So I'm really excited to dive into that with you. O'Shea, you are up next on my screen.
Awesome sauce. Hey, how's it going? Thanks everyone for joining, and definitely thanks to Share the Mic and Cyber and DEF for having me. Yeah, my name's O'Shea Bowens. I guess my straight gives it away. I'm located in Boston. Been in cyber, right? Been in cyber for, I guess, close to like 13 years. Been into it since I was a kid. Pretty much the entirety of my professional career has been around defense. So I'm one of those weirdos that really likes to solve challenges by identifying the attackers and trying to determine what they took and what they're up to next. So done some stuff on the government side, done some stuff on the private side, mostly on the private side now. I'm the CEO at Null Hat Security, where we focus on essentially helping organizations develop and build talent via a platform we've been making around skills assessment. So a big mission of mine in my life is really helping. It's the mark I'd like to leave, ideally, is really helping build out and strengthen the pipeline of not only more people of color in cyber, but helping individuals quickly assess where their skill sets sit and linking them to jobs and projects that are really a match for them. I'm also the manager of the CERT at Postman. We're a software company focused on APIs. I think everyone knows what Postman is. Mostly in my spare time, I snowboard. I'm a big snowboarder, big advocate for snowboard. I started a conference called SkiCon. And then, I'm online somewhere on Twitter or somewhere on the interwebs doing something related to defense. So not too hard to find me. So happy to be here. Super pumped for this.
And O'Shea, if I remember correctly, you are a total Renaissance man. You're a chef too, right? And
I cook a lot. I brew beer and we cook. I like to open up like a tapas restaurant, kind of themed on. I lived in Spain at one point. I worked at a tapas restaurant, so like it was amazing, and it shaped my like cooking experience. So originally, I was in the mix. I was in the position where I had to decide either culinary school. I went to school for fashion design originally, actually, or security. But I've been in like security and kind of like the hacking world since I was like 13 or 14. So I kind of went back to what I knew as a teenager. But I was this close to like going to culinary school in France. I just, had to make a decision on which one's going to give me money. I had school loans to pay.
I love that story. And I think it's important to know, like, all these different skills, and those core traits, as I like to call them, not soft skills, but core traits, that really goes into it. So thank you for sharing that. We'll dive into some of that. Next up, I have Mary Galloway, the Mary Galloway.
Hello, Mary Galloway, coming from Las Vegas. It's early here, but I am a customer success architect for a large security vendor by day. I also run the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu, a 501c3 national nonprofit organization providing hands-on training for women and girls. I've been in the tech space for a little over 12 years now. I've worked in armed security, retail, government, private sector, all of that good stuff. And as it pertains to culture, I think everybody needs a seat at the table and their voice needs to be heard. And that's how you can drive that innovation and have everybody's voice in that mix of things. I'm going to keep it short because I know we want to get into the questions. And we have one more person to bring on the stage.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. All right, Caroline, thanks for joining us. Love to hear your thoughts.
My pleasure. Caroline Wong, Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt.io. We're a pen test as a service company. Started off my cybersecurity career leading security teams at eBay and Zynga. Did a little bit of global product management at Symantec, some management consulting with Cigital. I also host a podcast called Humans of InfoSec, and I teach courses on LinkedIn Learning. With regards to this topic of culture and innovation, I think that the fundamental thing about innovation is you're trying to figure out new ways to do something better. And I think that involves experimentation. And I think that experimentation involves failure. And so I actually think that a really key component to developing a culture that's actually going to innovate is figuring out how to support people when they try new stuff and it fails. Because I think only by trying a lot of new things and failing a bunch are you going to come up with that new and different pioneering idea, despite the naysayers, despite the mistakes. I think it's a lot more art than science, but I think that there is a way to encourage a culture of innovation by understanding on a fundamental level that learning involves mistakes and failure.
Yes. Amen to that. I completely agree. And I want to pull on that thread, and I'll just say too, from my experience, especially in the intelligence community on, encouraging that failure. And to, Matthew's point, a couple minutes ago, what are the objectives that we're trying to get to, right? What is the overall goal? And I think that really allows room for trying and quote unquote failing and going down rabbit holes and things like that. But I would love to bridge this. So I want to go to Jules on this. So in your work, culture as a service, how do you encourage something like that? The ability to quote unquote fail and to innovate, which, as Caroline was saying, is the ability to try to create new ways of doing something. So how do you do that in the organizations that you work with?
That's a great question. So one of the things I'll start with is the missed opportunity is when organizations believe they can drive by decree. So you can't make people do it. And if you consider that to be the truth, then it needs to be a movement, grassroots. So from the bottom up, you've got to get a number of people across the organization who people listen to get excited about it. And then you have to create a situation where you're testing a particular theory. So we want to test this theory. We want to show some success. So no matter how many times that group fails, it doesn't matter. It's the one success. they can point to that they can then spread out across other areas, and you can ask larger questions, more complex questions. So in the area of cybersecurity, the question is, how do we get more people to stop clicking on an email, right? We need people to stop clicking. The question is, which teams are highest risk for clicking? Which in those departments, what are the behaviors they're doing that contribute to that? And who are the people that would influence those people in order to get them to consider alternative behaviors? How do we get them in a room to figure out what can be changed in order to get that end result? And then what you do is, based on the process you put in place for that, you apply it to other areas, and you just do that on a broader and broader scale.
I love that. I'm so fascinated by the work that you're doing. Caroline, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so I've actually heard something super insightful from Jules, which is something I think like people who may be skeptics are like, how do you encourage a culture of failure? Like, that doesn't sound like a super good idea. And I think that the way you do it is that you measure stuff. I think you measure and you keep track of data and you do these experiments purposefully and in a measured way where you can, to Matthew's point, measure your progress. I think measurement is absolutely key. You cannot just hire a bunch of people and say, now everyone fail. That is not the way. I think measurement is really kind of the other side of that coin.
And I think that we have to stop thinking that the problems in security are unique to us. They're not unique to us. In fact, other industries have solved the problems in security years before. So I'll give you an example. I used to brag about my sales closing rate was 80%. I mean, it was every time people would say it, they'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I got to one of my mentors, who's now my mentor, and I was like, yeah, they're like, okay, so what's your closing rate? I was like 80%. He was like, you haven't failed enough. I want to find that you're going out and reaching people and more people are telling you no. That's how I know you're actually going after more business. If you're at 80%, it's because you're going after people you know will say yes, which means you're not trying hard enough. So we've got to rethink this idea of failure. I was so proud that I hadn't failed, but in fact, I wasn't challenging myself because I hadn't failed enough. That's a shift in thinking.
That's amazing. Matthew, I'd love to turn to you on this subject, especially where you said go, drive towards that objective, right? In my experience a long time ago, it was, well, I can't really say what it was for, for operational reasons, but when we're talking about this measurement thing, we weren't measured by state reports, right? It was analytic outcomes. And so that allowed us some more freedom. So I'm wondering if you can talk about your experience with this sort of driving towards the objective concept.
Thank you. So going back, actually connecting to Carolyn's point about measuring success, right? That if you set an objective, it has to be concrete or else nobody knows that they've reached it. And that leads to uncertainty, that leads to doubt, that leads to confusion. Even when it comes to studying, when I talk to my staff and I advise them on an activity, they say, I want to learn a thing, right? And I go, well, no, you have to put a course on it so that it is bounded. So I think in activities where it is, it can be spoken at a higher level, like we want to, I'm just going to do a security test. We want to make something more secure. What does that mean, right? And so to distill it down into something actionable, to say we want to get a report in that has remediation steps for the development team, that has strategic recommendations, things that people can look at and say, okay, we have delivered on that. They can then look at it and feel good that they approach it. If it comes out and there's nothing on it, they know that it was inadequate, versus we just want to be secure. It's harder to judge. Coverage, we want to say, did we touch everything? And if you can build out at least a hypothetical list of, here are all the things that we would expect of this particular test or this particular review would entail, you can say, we did all those things. And then, maybe we did more than that. We built onto it in support of that higher goal. That goes to the whole OKR model. If we have an objective, we have a key result pairing. Building out wherever possible you can do that is critical, because then you can measure and point to it and say, yes, in support of this objective, we have delivered 4 or 5 key results. We deem that good, versus felt good enough to me, which is unfortunately what leads to that we disagree, we're confused, we're disorganized, and things fall apart.
Interesting. Mary, I'd like to turn to you on this. You work on getting people hands-on training so that they get into this career field. What are the things that you teach to, and what are the sort of skills and traits that you're trying to highlight as well?
So one of the things we try to highlight, obviously, we want our members, the women, the guys that come through, to be able to do the work, right? To be able to put hands on keyboard and identify where the bad is, identify, how somebody got in, identify their vulnerabilities. But we also try to teach them other core skills: leadership, teamwork, organizational skills, initiative, right? We want them to take the initiative to go out and do something different, to learn that new skill. And so we do that through a variety of different ways besides just training, through study groups, networking, having small groups of people working together on projects, because we understand that that's important, even though it's in a nonprofit setting, even though it's not in a work setting. Those skills are important when you go into a work setting and when you're inside of an environment, right? And if there's an environment that you're going into that encourages that development and growth, now you're adding to that culture in that space.
Thank you for that. And I just want to connect this to sort of a real world issue right now. So recently, I think it was the Air Force's first chief of software office, he left and he sort of lamented that we're falling behind. And you have to wonder, is it kind of a cultural issue that, maybe we're not encouraging this, trying and failing and being innovative, in that space to, and being allowed to do certain things. And I will be the first to admit, I don't know what, that office is like and what they're trying to do, but it seems to me that there may not be a lot of wiggle room there. So O'Shea, I know you wanted to kind of hit on this, so I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so if people aren't familiar with this, there's a gentleman named Nicholas, I think it's Chilean or Chilean. I may be butchering this dude's last name, but anyway, he was he was the chief software officer for the Air Force. So, focusing on cyber, a lot of the cyber units. I think most people know, or even if you're outside of the armed forces or gov or mil space, that, the Air Force is kind of like the leader in cyber when it comes to armed services.
Totally. I was an Air Force officer, but.
So, what's interesting about this is you had someone at a really, really high level essentially call it quits for his, and then he kind of wrote this op-ed around why he was quitting, and one of the top reasons he stated why he decided to leave his post was, he doesn't see a future in which the U.S. is ahead of China when it comes to cybersecurity and cyberspace, and specifically noting that our lack of innovation when it comes to like AI and like ML, and intertwining that into our strategic plans around cybersecurity. So when I read that, I was like, well, that's something we were talking about years ago. I know before we started this, we were just speaking in the waiting room, but I left, government stuff in like 2012, 2013 timeframe. And I remember, big data was something that was still being spoken about, but it was mostly being referenced to more of the server admin space or storage space. It wasn't necessarily something that was a part of the conversation and planning of like cyber operations. And in a sense, I think this guy's kind of dead on, right? Like what you see happening in China specifically, right, is this rapid space of like innovation to product to like release. And that's not only on the private side, that's also intertwined with the government. They're a socialist country, so they do have like more direct ties with companies that are, companies that exist there for good or bad. We can go into whole, intellectual property theft conversations till we're blue in the face. But what that shows to me is like really the lack of, us, when I say us, I mean the US actually having that type of that type of relationship essentially between public and private is something that we kind of desperately have to work on, right? Like this is one of the reasons I wanted to come here, and because I like the work that DEF is doing when I learned more about them, because I think that's the key to really survival, right? Let's look at what's happening now. This year, there's been just like a massive uptick in ransomware cases, right? So traditional technologies aren't going to solve that. This is only most likely going to get worse. You're going to see more attacks that are crafted leveraging ML. You've already seen a few threat actors, a bit more of the sophisticated threat actors out there leveraging like ML with their exploit kits and with the campaigns that they're pushing. So the question really is, what do we do from our side to really raise the level of innovation, and how do we strengthen that relationship? And I think a lot of this is like perception. There still is this, for good or bad, there still is this kind of concept in a lot of the younger generation's minds, especially a lot of the young hackers out there, a lot of like younger technologists of the government does shady stuff. I never want to be a part of that, and I think that's dissipating slowly. But I think, from a mill and gov side, there has to be more of that outreach, get into people when they're younger, get into those middle school kids, get into those high school kids, specifically get into those middle school and high school kids that look different from what the current landscape kind of represents, right? Going into the Chicagos, going into the Baltimores, going into the inner cities, and kind of pouring money into programs in which you can get more individuals in school interested in technology, specifically interested in cybersecurity, and changing that kind of like opinion of, government's up to shady stuff, right? Like finding a way to not only reach them when they're younger, but keeping them engaged. This is why I love the work of like a lot of like what Patriot does, right? Like they work with a lot of younger individuals in cybersecurity and trying to get people in. I think that's like awesome. So that's one thing. I don't want to go too long, but one thing is that perception, changing that, getting to them when they're younger. I think also another one is like really having more open projects that individuals can join. Like DARPA has some really, really cool stuff, but unless you're like, at that level where you feel comfortable and you have the backing and you understand how to actually apply for some of the projects with DARPA, it's really hard for someone kind of like just mid-career cybersecurity to jump on something like that. In my mind, I think there needs to be more projects that are coming from the gov and mill side in which they're reaching out, trying to get individuals that exist within the current cybersecurity career landscape and switching over. So reaching out to like people on this panel, for example, hey, we have a project coming up. We noticed that you've posted on XYZ social media about, reverse engineering malware or cloud security. We'd love to get your opinion here. Like more of like aggressively pushing to pull in people that are in mid-career and maybe senior levels of their career right now, and grabbing them and having them come work on projects that doesn't interfere with too much of their daytime life. Because I think that's the only way that we kind of catch up to where they are. It's really looking at the talent pool we have right now, like people on this panel, and reaching out and getting them to work on projects that government and military are funded for.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm so glad that you hit on the public-private partnership aspect, as that is our theme for this campaign for Share the Mic in Cyber. So Jules, I know you wanted to make a point there, so please weigh in.
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest differences in the way that the U.S. operates versus some of the other nation states is that the private sector more than anything drives our innovation. Whereas in other countries, if you think about Israel or if you think about China, it's the government that is actually leading, directing, and determining exactly where the country is going. When it's one central function that is managing the direction of a particular industry or the direction of of a nation, it's much easier for everyone to be aligned on the way forward. I think now there's so many competing methods and ways by which we can go in a direction that many times there's so many disparate companies, interests, and they're all competing for the same pools of money. In addition, because the government is looking at private industry to actually help it, we find that they themselves haven't put in place things that that promote innovation. It's very, very hard to work with public, state, local government, federal government, because there's a lot of paperwork in order to actually get into a particular program. That is not innovative. In fact, if we started to look at the processes and innovated those first, we might have more innovation come out of it. I think the other thing is the natural instinct in American institutions is to promote stability across a long period of time. It is not about destabilization or uncertainty, and innovation requires those things. So that's the problem, is that the actual institutions that we're using for innovation are designed not to be innovative because they need to be stable in order to reflect properly to the market, in order to continue making profits, in order to build trust. So the question is, how do we divide up either private institutions, or how do we create public-private partnerships where innovation is the goal? And what we want to do is figure out there's a team that's going to keep everything stable, and there's the one that's got to be destabilized in order to move forward fast. We've got to divide the roles of our organization, of our governments, so that we have people dedicated to innovation who can compete against the Chinas of the world, who have an entire nation designed to do that. And then we have another group that is supposed to keep us all moving forward together. That's what we have to do, I feel like, in order to become more competitive.
I love that. I've never thought about it in that way, having something stabilizing and something, purposefully destabilizing. I think that's
intentional culture of innovation.
Yeah. Oh, you are the culture girl. Does anyone have any, so Matthew, you wanted to weigh in on that.
Just briefly, you reminded me, Jules, of, if you're familiar with the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, there's a portion that really goes into that if you have a stable organization, it's very hard to innovate within it because the measures, the goals, the methodology that are used are stable, right? They do not support. They seek stability and are inherently resistant to innovation. So in that example, or in that book, excuse me, carving out, to your point, these teams, these tiger teams, you want to call them, that are measured differently, that are politically and economically isolated from the mothership, so they can't innovate in amongst themselves rather than having to be responsive to that stable mission. They can be innovative without cannibalizing the primary goal of the stable organization. Has been proved or has been documented. It's much more successful than trying to do them both at the same time within the same org.
And think about who has those now, the big tech companies, Google, Alphabet, eBay had a team that was dedicated. I think they disbanded the group, but all the big tech companies have this already. That's why they can keep innovating.
Caroline, you had a thought?
So I think this combination of teams working together that are maybe at different ends of a spectrum with regards to stability is super interesting and super important. There's this, I guess it was like an experiment. And they said, okay, here's some string and some tape and some marshmallows and some like spaghetti. And they said, hey, MBAs, build the highest tower you can. And then they said, hey, 5-year-olds, build the highest tower you can. And you can imagine that those two groups approached this objective very differently. And in this case, the kindergartners built the higher tower out of total chaos. And that is not to say that kindergartners are smarter than MBAs or better in any way. They just take a different approach, and there is value in the difference. And of course, there's like a bunch of stuff that MBAs are better at than kindergartners, and so I think that as we're defining objectives and scoping problems and making sure we're crystal clear on the problem statement and the key results that we're trying to drive to, there's an opportunity to say, okay, as we're building the team that's going to try and tackle this particular problem, what types of behaviors do we want to see? And to try both. And absolutely, eBay's always had an innovation team. Cobalt's got an innovation team. And the way that the success for those teams is measured is really different from other teams in the company on purpose.
Can you talk about how they're measured? The success is measured?
So here's one thing. Trying experiments should happen on a schedule. So they should be time bound, and there should be measurements. So for example, our innovation team at Cobalt does regular hackathons where anyone in the company, you don't have to be an engineer, you don't have to be a product manager. Anyone in the company can participate in these hackathons, and we have specific times of the year when these happen. And it's kind of like this like super fun, creative, innovative party. And we say, put your day job aside and let's just get into these small groups that are consisting of folks from all sorts of different teams. And just, what is the saying? Just throw some spaghetti on the wall, just see what happens. And then there's voting processes to say, hey, we've got criteria. We say, okay, what problems are they solving? How big are these problems? What might a level of effort be if we were to take this sort of hackathon prototype solution and turn it into something that's production ready? And then, so there are all these gates, right? It's like any sort of pipeline. You start out with like a bunch of ideas, and then you use criteria to get it to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. And that ends up going to customers where we say, what do you think about this idea? So it's a lot of creating that freedom to do whatever and then filtering to get to something that's actually going to solve a real business problem, a real pain point for a customer.
I love that. And yeah, when I was at Recorded Future, I remember the hackathons, and that was so much fun. And I completely forgot about that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Mary, I wanted to go to you. You said you run a customer success team at a large company. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, creating that culture on your team.
So I don't actually run the team, but I do the team that I'm on. They have it's different, right? And it's different than what I've ever worked in. They're willing to help you. They want to listen to your ideas. They want to help you grow and train you and help you expand in the company. I used to work in the government before I came to the private side, and it was way different, right? The culture, there wasn't a culture of innovation. There was no culture of, hey, let's try this project this way, or let's do this the other way. So moving from the government side to the private side, you have that ability, right? They're open to understanding that. And then working with the customers, you have to be able to quickly innovate, quickly understand what the customer needs, and be able to help them identify how our products will fit into their space, right? I work in the source space, and so that's a whole new different thing that's going on right now. And the teams that I'm on and the groups that I work with, they don't stop you from doing anything. They encourage it. They encourage you to try it and fail. And then it's like, okay, well, let's learn from what we did, and then let's do it better next time.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, and I'm looking at some of the questions in the chat and thinking about this, and the culture thing and empowering people, I think, is so important. But I think there's this, sort of element of fear, at least in government, because you're working with taxpayer dollars, and there's a lot of laws that you have to follow, and so if anyone has any thoughts on that particular aspect, how we sort of overcome that. But also there's a question here. There are a lot of left of boom issues with AI deployment in the Department of Defense. And what are some of the ways that you think individual users can contribute to a culture shift in that space?
I think this is just totally based on experience and kind of my opinion, right? I think when it comes to the gov side, there's a massive difference between having like those open collaboration type of projects, like Mary mentioned, like the hackathon within the org, right? Like when I was there, maybe things have changed, but on Department of Energy side, we didn't really have a lot of that type of stuff that you see like on the private side. There weren't really like hackathons that went on like every quarter, right? There wasn't really like a lot of open projects because things are so departmentalized and segmented, of course, based on clearance level and your specific role. I think you'd really start to see a shift when, honestly, when you see Gov or Mill start to take on some of the cultural aspects of what you see in some of the top innovation companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Postmans, all like the companies like that. I'm not saying like totally move away from their mission at all. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is having that, like that level of openness where it's, hey, we know that not everyone here is going to be great at programming, but if you have an interest in it, maybe the shift isn't just we can situate you inside of a training regimen in which you learn that, right? Because Gov and Mill is very structured like that. Like if you do have an interest in pen testing, well, there's probably some course or some training program you can go be integrated into for 6 to 9 months, and that's great. But moving away from that is having those kind of like those hackathons, right? And then really kind of focusing on, hey, this is what we're seeing in real world, right? It's not just from what threat actors are targeting from a Mill and Gov side, it's what threat actors are doing from a private side. And here are the companies that are mostly affected in the financial side, on the pharmaceutical side. Here are the problems that they're facing. How do we begin to address those from having that conversation, making that open? And once they've established like a baseline or like a platform, taking that and then coming over to the public side, the private side, and saying, hey, we'll say Bank of America, for instance. Hey, Bank of America, we know that you guys have been having issues with XYZ type of threat actors. Here's some of the things that we're thinking about, creating, but we don't really have, maybe the talent or even the time to totally create that. What are you guys working on your side? And then filtering down from a BOA to more of all the financial institutions to, hey, financial markets, like these are the problems that we're seeing. What are you guys working on? And then if there's not really an answer there, now you're opening up to the public and making more of an open competition to, this is a very simplistic view, but posting something on Twitter like, hey, this is a collaboration between, DOD, some of the top banks in the country. These are the problems that we're facing. If you have an interest or you have an idea in regards to maybe how to help us solve that, this is the competition we're having. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it helps to throw some money into it. There's a prize at a couple $1,000, $10,000, $20,000. You'd be surprised how many people will take time to try to help solve that problem, right? But this goes back to what we said earlier, that openness that equates to innovation. So having, in some ways, it is courage, because you're asking individuals in Gov and Mill sides to admit to what they don't know. At the same time, you're asking people on the private sector side to admit to what they don't know. And let's come together and let's look at those talent pools out there. And this is where it kind of filters down to, okay, what groups are out there besides the norm, right? We don't need to go to, NYU's Polytech Institute and only work with them. Maybe there's something that Cyber Patriots doing with some younger kids. Maybe there's another program that Share the Mic is doing with some of the people that are involved. Really creating that openness and establishing timelines and objectives where you're making it way, way, way more inclusive to solve these problems. And knowing that it's not going to be solved in a month. It may not be solved in 6 months. It may take a year. But I just believe that when you have like that level of openness and you're bringing more people into the fold that are out there, that are hanging out, that are interested in cyber, that have skills, there's a good chance we can solve a lot of these problems together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds to me, there's a need for a lot of process hacking, right? So, fixing those processes. And, there's a paper that I've been trying to write for, I'll just say several months. I haven't gotten around to it, but it's, allowing people to enter and leave and come back into government and private industry, much easier. And so I think this is a case for that. There's a question here in the chat. It says, doesn't innovation require first understanding the as is element of the stable organization? And, do you have to know the rules before you can break them? And I'd love to put that out to the group.
No. And the reason why I say that is, I think Carolyn gave a good example of the 5-year-olds versus the MBAs. What the five-year-olds don't have is limitation. They don't have any reason why something can't happen. They just try it, it fails, they keep going. The problem with learning what as is that you're then limiting yourself within the confines of what exists when you're supposed to be creating a solution to a problem that might require that it be outside the bounds of what exists. So I think it's important to figure out what it is that you're solving for, what it is that the earthly limitations are, and we can even go into space, but you also want to figure out, okay, so what are the desired outcomes? And to the point that I think Matthew's been mentioning, how do we measure it? You don't want to look at what exists today as a limitation. And I think someone put the example of Ford, right? We could create faster horses, or we could build fast cars. Cars didn't exist yet. So that's why I feel like we don't want to limit ourselves to what exists today, because if we had, there would be no Facebook. There was no Facebook before, it was created. Someone had to think to themselves, I really want to connect. And I was at UMass and I don't want to age myself, but when Facebook happened and it started in Massachusetts, my first thought was, why? Like, why do I want to connect with all these people? And today it's the way that I keep in contact with my cousins in Nigeria. So that's the thing. We've got to think outside the box, which means there can be no box. There can't be a box.
That's a really great point. So we're coming up on time here, and I'd love to put it out to the group. Does anyone have any last thoughts here on this issue? I think what we've talked about here has been really illuminating. I've loved hearing all of your perspectives, and I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. So would love to hear some last minute thoughts from you, maybe 30 seconds to a minute each. And maybe Caroline or O'Shea, we'll start with you.
No, I mean, I would say kind of like parting thoughts are, take it upon, yourself. I'm speaking to the individuals that are operating within the cybersecurity space right now to maybe dedicate an hour or two to actually look at some of the projects that are coming out from DHS, from DOD, from some of the other 3-letter agencies that are open to the public, and begin to kind of just throw your hat in the ring, right? Maybe you don't get on this project, but maybe you get on that next one. Trying to communicate with more individuals that are operating within that space. What I've noticed over the last couple of years, a lot of these individuals are on LinkedIn now. Like, I knew certain people that worked at like DOD and NSA that were never on LinkedIn. Like years ago, they're like, why would on earth would I do that? But now they're starting to follow what we're speaking about as cybersecurity practitioners, right? They're a lot more open to trying to determine what problems we're working on. Government moves slow. We all know this. So you can't count on them to kind of step out and totally lead this. So take it upon yourself to find out what projects are going on, joining organizations like this, and really reaching out to other individuals that are outside of your peer networks to maybe try to help solve some of these problems. Because I think it's likely going to be on a lot of people on the private side to kind of help step in and solve this, at least for now, until government comes up with a plan.
I have a closing thought that I'd love to share, which is I think that no matter the culture of your greater organization, no matter how far on the spectrum it is towards stability, in cyber, there are always people who want to innovate. And so I would just recommend to folks, seek those folks out, and maybe they're in your organization and you can partner with them and do some, stuff together. And also I think there's so much value to be gained in terms of networking outside of your organization, outside of your direct industry.
I believe strongly that there are problems that you're seeing, that you're experiencing yourself, that there are other people who want to solve. Find a way to have the conversations about that and solve a small problem. It will build into other things and you'll find new things to solve for. But innovation doesn't have to be this really big, dynamic solution to a major complex problem. It can be a different way by which to solve a small problem. So let's rethink innovation as well.
My final thought is, don't be afraid of failure. I think everybody said it today. Failure leads to innovation. it just makes you stronger, So if it's in your organization, if it's in your personal life, if it's in your outside activities, don't be afraid of it. Use that as energy to keep moving.
Love that. Matthew, your final thought here.
Yeah, just to echo Mary's point that failure is key. The growth mindset that Dr. Dweck talks about, both for yourself and for others, you have to have the grace and the patience to accept that failure is inevitable, that when people around you fail, if they're trying in support of the objective, that you have to support them in that and dust themselves off and yourself off to pick up, try again, and view that as being on the path to success, not just an indication of who you are, but just a part of the growth process.
I love that. Trying to decouple your worthiness from, whether you're succeeding or quote unquote failing. And that I think is important, also challenging. Thank you everyone for your thoughts today. I know I learned a lot and I'm so appreciative of this group. I'm so happy to have met you all through Share the Mic in Cyber as practitioners and allies. So thank you so much. You're all amazing. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day. And I will turn it back over to Michael and Trish. All right. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's Trish Martinelli. I'm the community team lead at the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, and I am filling in for our amazing executive director, Mike Madrid, as he steps away to do some day job stuff. What is that all about? I don't know. As you guys saw kind of on the sideline in the chat here, this panel has just touched my heart. And Lauren, thank you so much for pulling it together. Thank you everyone here for, kind of putting your energy and your expertise into Share the Mic in Cyber. And in case you didn't notice, I've been cyber stalking all of you on LinkedIn while you were talking. So if you have random, new invitations from someone, that would be me. So thank you so much. And just really look forward to continuing this relationship and making space for all voices at the table, especially in such an important event and issues such as cyber to the national security community. And so with that, actually, I am going to ask our conference organizer, Chow, to turn on his camera so that I can do something that Mike also entrusted to me. We have had an amazing conference. This panel is an example of the work that we're doing, and we really could not have done it without Chow, who heard that we were organizing a conference, and the very first thing that he's done as a national team member was say, okay, sure, I'll take it from here. And just wanted to give an opportunity to say thank you so much to Chow for what he's done and his continued efforts behind the scene today. It's kind of weird because we're seeing Chow in a building when normally we would see him in a parking lot, which is one of our favorite things about Chow, and just is willing to literally roll with it, including rolling down the highway and stopping in any random parking lot to jump on a conference call in support of this. Chow, really, honestly, it's been amazing. You've done a fantastic job. Tomorrow's going to really be a knockout as well. And please, Chow, if you have something you'd like to say to the deaf community, we would like to give you the spotlight at this time.
Oh, hello, everybody. So first off, thank you, panelists. Awesome, all of you. I love to talk. I love the diversity. Actually, the most important thing, because I know when I started in cybersecurity back in the mid-1990s, there's only one flavor. And if you're not of that flavor, they look at you very weird. And I'm like, it's straight to the heart when we're saying, hey, that finally diversity, right? Because it only can make the arena stronger. For all the deaf community and the attendees, thank you for being part of DEF 2021. Without you, there'll be no conference, right? So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Trish.
Yes, and we have a working lunch. We have 2 panels. I will lead the discussion with the Agoras, which are our local chapters for deaf around the country, as well as I'm going to say Navy midshipmen, but I think I've got it wrong. Chow, help me out here. as well as another lunchtime panel that I should be better prepared to announce. I'm looking. Okay.
Cornerstone.
It is the Cornerstone. Oh my God, another one of my favorite projects. So Cornerstone is this amazing project that we have here at the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, where we took a look at what is being taught in the entrepreneurship classes at graduate level. We've taken the skills that are being taught at those graduate level courses and we teach it to our members here in the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum. So lots of great choices for your lunchtime, and hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.